Alright, welcome to the fifth and final video on elk hunting um, with Life and Whiskey. Again, I am Jordan, and to finish everything off, we're going to finish up with Evan Williams yet again. This is the Evan Williams single barrel, and it is 43.3% alcohol or 86.6 proof. Again, this is a single barrel, so out of any given barrel, they proof it down, and then how many ever bottles they get out of it is whatever they're going to get. So for this particular bottle, this is barrel number 1287. It was distilled and then put on oak back in August 25th of 2011, and they took it out and bottled it on September 27th, 2019. So it aged for 8 years and 1 month, and every single barrel is going to be slightly different, and because they're not mixing barrels, you're going to get some different flavors out of it. So if you can find this particular barrel, you'll find similar notes to what I'm giving, and if not, then you're probably going to come up with something a little bit different. Sometimes you get that unicorn, you get amazing barrel. Even the same, so this is the same recipe that is put into all the other Evan Williams products. And so it is amazing the different varieties and flavor that you can get from barrel to barrel, even though it's the same product going in there. So with that, the mash bill is that same 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% barley. It's a Heaven Hill product, and with that, we will go ahead and open her up and pour a little bit here. Don't let that little drip go to waste. Now on the nose, it has a really, really good nose. I'll give it a lot. You can get that apple, some of those orchard fruits out of there. It's not as cherry as a lot of the other ones, but you still got a corn forward smell on there. And if you see me looking down here, it's because I'm looking at my notes. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything out of here, but it's very sweet, fruity, a lot of caramel, whatever you want to say. It smells really, really nice. Whew. Okay, so this one has a lot going on in the flavor. For me, this particular barrel imparts a lot of barrel spice on it, kind of throughout the entire experience, the entire taste. It's a little bit punchy, a little spiky. It's only 86 proof, and I've had some up in the 120 area that doesn't punch quite as much as this one. So it's a little bit punchy, spiky, a lot of pepper in there. But it starts with a sweetness. And then it kind of moves into some corn. You get that corn secondary. That sweetness in the front is definitely the fruitiness, like an apple fruity. And then just moves into that corn. And those flavors move really quick. And then from corn, it goes straight into this really prominent cherry note. And from that cherry note, it moves into that finish. So the cherry is kind of like a sweet cherry, like if you took Bing cherries, not maraschino or something like that, but some kind of a dark cherry flavor. If you had that, and then moves back off of that note straight into a corn dust, underlined with barrel spice. That's kind of what I get on that finish. This is the second go around that I've had with this particular whiskey, and what I mean by that is I opened this exact bottle previously and had tasted it, took my notes on it, and I have to say right now the flavors are a bit different than what I had originally started with, and you'll notice that with whiskey over time. It'll change how long you let it air out and open up in the glass, what you've had to eat, the time of day, all those that you're drinking, all those different variables will impart different flavors or allow you to pick out different flavors and different notes on the nosing. And you know, the very first time I went to this bottle, I wasn't really a fan, and right now I'm really, really liking this. Yeah. So if any of that's interesting to you, go and pick up a barrel. Maybe you'll get lucky. Sorry, a barrel. Go pick up a bottle. Maybe you'll get lucky with the single barrel and get something that you find really, really interesting. Um, you know, they're all going to be a little bit different. If you can find this exact barrel, you know, you're welcome for the notes. If not, you know, explore the one that you do manage. Again, this is barrel 1,287. So 1,287. If you like what you're what I'm finding, go ahead and see if you can find that. Really good whiskey. All right, so I'm gonna put this down now. Gonna go into the final episode here of How to Hunt Elk, and we're gonna be talking about meat care and packing. Okay, so let's say you did all the previous work, it all worked out for you, and you were fortunate enough to put yourself in a position that you were able to make a good shot and get your animal. Okay, so now here you are, you're standing over your animal. You're, I don't know, 2 miles from your access point, so either where you're going to have to you know, drive to or back to your camp. And now what? So if you're like me, my very first animal I shot solo, and you know, it was in my mind I thought I knew what I was in for, and it turns out that I was right in what I was thinking. I was wrong in my thinking of how I was going to be able to do it. Now, I knew it was going to be a difficult task, but you really, really don't understand how difficult of a task it's going to be until you actually do it. And hopefully you're lucky enough to have somebody there with you. I had my wife with me this year. She was a tremendous help. She actually packed out a quarter in the back straps and stuff. She did 2 loads for me this year. Just those 2 loads was tremendous. So if you're hunting with somebody, you're going to appreciate it when it comes time for the pack out. But you just killed your animal. Now what? Okay, first things first, in almost all states that I'm aware of, you have to tag your animal right away. So don't forget that you need to go out and put your physical carcass tag onto that animal. Here in Wyoming, we also have the added step that you need to sign that tag. So if you're hunting in Wyoming, make sure you have a pen. I use a black Sharpie. That way I can write, because the tags themselves are kind of that slick plastic that most tags are these days. And make sure you have a means to attach it. So I always carry a couple of zip ties, and then as part of my spare parts kit that I take with me out into the woods for my bow and stuff, I have black electrical tape. You can use that to attach it as well. So first things first, tag your animal before you do anything else. And I should say, as always, elk are big animals, so ensure always, always, always that animal is 100% dead before you approach it. Even if there is the slightest breath of life still in that animal, they can put a very big hurt on you. If you're not paying attention, you can get kicked, or if it's a bull, you can get stabbed. Not pleasant. So just make sure the animal is dead 100% before you approach it. Tag it. Then is the time to, you know, clear some of the blood away. If the animal died in full sun, so it's not in the shade at all, if it's an archery hunt especially, and it's early on in the year and it's warm, like this year it was 95 degrees for me, my very first move before any of the pictures or any of that stuff, get that thing into the shade. Especially in that kind of heat, that animal is going to start to bloat almost immediately, so time is of the essence. And so get the animal in the shade, take your pictures, do that as quickly as you can, but make sure that you make the effort to take good pictures. I know when I hunted by myself, I did not take the greatest pictures. I took a couple of nice-ish ones, but they didn't turn out perfect. But you know what? Such is life, and that's kind of how I do things. Just like these videos, they're not perfect. And so, you know, do the best you can, but hurry up and take those pictures as soon as you can. The animal died in an awkward position. If you're by yourself, depending on the gradient that it's on, it's going to be pretty hard to move that animal any real distance. I mean, you're talking about something that's like 500-600 pounds for a bull. It's going to be tough to move. So, and I don't advise you sitting there retching on it. That's a good way to like pop your back or mess something up in some kind of herky-jerky movement. You know, if you got some sort of a block and tackle or something like that, you might be able to do it. Or if you can loop or rope around something and move it, awesome. Oftentimes that kind of weight, even a small guy like me, I'm 175 pounds. I'm not extremely strong or anything. I can move an animal a good 3 to 5 feet with a relatively significant effort. But you want to set that animal up, you know, nice for your pictures, but also in a position where it'll be easy enough to work on it when you start cutting up the animal. After that, you want to decide what you're going to do with it. And what I mean by that is it a bull that you're going to do a shoulder mount on? Is it, are you just going to do a euro, take the skull and stuff with it? Or does none of that matter? Or if it's a cow, you know, are you just taking the meat out and leaving everything else? You want to keep in mind before you start the process where you're going to make your cuts and what you're going to do for proof of sex, which is required in most states that I know of. So here in Wyoming, you must leave proof of sex attached to the animal. So you can't like cut it off. You know, say it's a bull, you can't cut off the penis and take it with you. You have to keep it naturally attached to the animal. And so that's typically the first thing I do is think about what I'm going to leave as evidence of sex, and which piece I'm going to leave it attached on. So I do this with antelope or deer or whatever. Normally what I do all my major big cuts that I'm doing, but I'm constantly thinking when I get to that hind quarter, the very first hind quarter I take is going to be the one that I leave the evidence of sex on. So I make sure that I do that first, and think about it. But then I jump into my caping and stuff. What I do with my animals, and again, over here on my notes, so forgive me for doing this kind of back and forth thing. But one of the things that I do first is, so I'm a meat hunter. I don't really trophy hunt. I might change my mind if it's some crazy huge bull, but I take the head with me, but that's it. And now you want, in today's day and age, this goes back to knowing the state you're in and knowing the laws and whatever else. CWD is a very big thing here in Wyoming in particular. The Wyoming-Colorado border is kind of the epicenter of where CWD originated. Or where they originally found it anyways. And so there's all kinds of laws as far as transport. Most states it's illegal nowadays to transport any of the brain or spine material of an animal with you across state lines. In some states it's illegal to take it from one hunting unit to another. And therefore you need to be aware of what those CWD laws are and how they're going to affect what you're going to do. So most of the time, you know, like here in Wyoming, if you wanted to do a shoulder mount, you're going to have to take that animal to a taxidermist here and not necessarily be able to transport it to your home state to get the taxidermy work done there. So those are things you want to look into for sure. So you want to be thinking about what you're going to do. Are you going to do that shoulder mount or the European mount? And that's going to help decide what cuts you're going to make and where you're going to make them and when you're going to make them. Again, check out Randy Newberg has a couple of good videos on the gutless method, which is what I suggest everybody do. It's a way of quartering an animal without, you know, slitting open the belly, pulling the guts out, and doing all that stuff. You don't have to do any of that stuff, especially in hot weather. That stuff's going to start bloating really quick. And so I don't recommend puncturing and getting into that, into the gut cavity if you don't have to. Now, you do have to pull out the tenderloins, which are inside that same cavity, but I save that step for the last thing that I do on that side of the animal. But Randy Newberg has a really good gutless method video. on elk and one on deer. There's a couple of other really good videos out there that I will leave in the description below. Actually, I got some written down here. The Pack-out by Montana Wild has a really good video of how to load up a pack and, you know, start preparing for your Pack-out. But I typically, so since I'm not doing a shoulder mount, I'll start with the side, this front shoulder, and I'll cut from the belly side of the fur up. And when it's really warm out, like this year and last year, the flies and the yellow jackets are almost indescribable as far as being on that carcass. You will see flies and yellow jackets by the hundreds, if not thousands, in 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. They show up. So because of that, when I'm doing it, although the number one most important thing to do with dealing with meat out in the field, especially when it's hot, is to get it cooled, and to get it cooled quickly, I cut this shoulder and I only work on this shoulder, you know, on the front shoulder first, and I only skin out to the shoulder. That way I can flop that skin piece back down over the chest cavity and kind of keep it all covered, so as not to expose that whole side to those insects right away. Okay, so I'll take this front shoulder first, put it immediately into a game bag, go hang it up out in the shade, you know, up so as much air can circulate around it as possible. I'll then move on to that same side's quarter, or hind quarter. I'll, again, only cut out from that hind quarter, keeping the skin flap over the top of this side of the, or over the top of the shoulder. Then I'll take that hind quarter, remove that, do the same thing, hang it up. For all your scrap meat, your back straps, your tenderloins, your neck roast, all that stuff, you're going to want to keep that meat elongated as much as possible. So like one of the last things you want to do is put it into a game bag, bunched up as a pile of meat down in the bottom of that game bag. That won't allow air to circulate around that meat very well, and it won't cool down very well. So what I try and do is lay out, like the back strap's going to be longer than your arm is. You're going to want to just slide it into a game bag long-wise, and if you can, take the cord and tie up the end of the game bag to close it up tight, and then use that to, like, you can either hang it that way, or you can lay it out over the top of a log or something. Like if you take two branches and kind of spread them apart and lay the bag across that, it's a balancing act, but your goal should be to get as much air movement around that as possible to cool that meat down. So then you're gonna, you know, get your meat into your game bags, and get it hanging as soon as possible. Now, where you are and how fast you're going to be able to get to that meat to pack it out, and how far you got to go, all those things are going to be variables you need to consider. But if you can, you know, hang it in the shade. So again, 95 degrees last year, we were on top of the mountain. We had no north-facing slopes. We had no creek bottoms within a mile. There really were not a lot of options for hanging that meat. Luckily, killed that bull around 3, and it took me 3 hours to quarter and bag that meat. So it's not a slow process. It's not a short process. It's a very long process, and it's very exhausting. You're doing a lot of muscle work. You're flexing your muscles, lifting heavy loads, doing stuff. So it's going to wear you out quite a bit. But luckily, because it was the evening, I knew it was going to get cooler that night. It was going to drop into about the 50s. And so all I had to do was hang that meat and let it cool down. And then, of course, you don't want to waste a trip out. So I carried a quarter, and my wife took those back straps and tenderloins out on that first load back to camp. And then we let the meat hang overnight to be recovered in the morning. If you can, though, if you can find, if you're lucky and it's on the north-facing slope, you're kind of in the shade, you're in the cool side of the mountain, or if you're near a creek bottom or anything else, you want to get that meat hung up in an area where you get cold air circulating as much as possible. Even a little, like you can find a little valley, that cold air is going to seep into that valley and cool that meat down as much as possible. Again, there's tons of videos out there on meat care. Randy Newberg does a great job. Corey Jacobsen does a great job kind of explaining some of the stuff that they do. So check those out for sure. Some things you want to consider is pretty much every state here in the West, there's going to be bears. And if you're here in Wyoming or Montana or Idaho, there's a good chance. Depending on what part of the state you're in, there's a good chance there's grizzly bears as well. That's a whole different story and series of information that you definitely want to make sure you know what you're doing if you're in grizzly country. But just in general, just knowing the basics of what to do when you're in bear country, whether it's black or grizzly. Hanging the meat up, hanging it high, getting the meat that you're going to try and that you're bringing out away from the carcass and leaving the carcass on the ground. You want to get that meat up in a tree and away. That also, it'll keep away wolves and coyotes and bobcats, and mountain lions can climb and they're pretty good acrobatically. I haven't heard too many stories of people losing meat to mountain lions. Again, if you get it, 100, 200 yards away from the carcass, let the animals have the carcass. They'll go after that anyways. But you want to get it hung up and get that air circulating around it as much as possible. Now, after you get that meat starting to cool down and stuff, so I've been fortunate enough not to have any meat spoil. And like I said, I managed to leave that meat overnight. Got down in the 50s. If it's 50 degrees, I leave all my meat, if I can, bone in. That bone will transmit, it'll conduct the heat from inside to the out, and get the meat or the heat out of the inner part of the meat through conductive cooling. Energy goes from high energy, so warm, to low energy, which is cold. So leaving the bone in will help get the heat transferred out. And so I've been lucky enough, I've not had any meat spoil. Hanging it up overnight seems like no matter how warm it is, you're still going to be okay. My first bull that I shot, it did not get below, I think it was like 65 or 67 degrees, which is pretty warm still for a nighttime temperature. And even that meat all came out fine. So what you want to do then is start planning for what you're going to do. So you can either have ice in a cooler. Now where I am, I'm 70 miles from town, and typically when I've been hunting, I'm planning on being out there for up to a week, so I don't have ice with me on hand. But if you do, either have like milk jugs that you've filled up and froze, or get the big blocks of ice, that stuff will keep the longest without melting off. If you get cubes, that stuff typically melts off pretty quick. And so I don't recommend it, but the first year what I did was overnight I left all my coolers wide open so that the cold night air, even though it was only 60-something degrees, would get into those coolers and cool down the interior plastic of the coolers. And the coolers I have are right behind me. I'll go through gear kind of last, but I take and cool those coolers down, and then before I left for the pack out in the morning, I closed all of them to kind of trap that cold air in there. And then I was bringing the meat that had cooled down, so through that convection, through the bone and through the air circulating and evaporative cooling, that meat cooled down, it cooled down colder than the 67-degree air temperature, right? That meat probably got down into the low 50s, maybe 40s. I don't know. I didn't put a thermometer in it, but convection and evaporation will cool stuff, just like you sweating in the middle of summer and that evaporation cools you down. That meat's going to be bloody and have liquid on it that can evaporate, and that'll help cool the meat. So for a day anyways, for a 24-hour time span, you should be able to keep the meat cool enough just by hanging it and then transferring it into a cold cooler. If you have ice, that's even better. But as you can see, like everybody talks about having those Yeti coolers and whatever else. I personally cannot afford $300, $400, $500, $600 for a cooler. This is just a Coleman cooler. I think it's a 60 quart, 120 quart, I don't remember. Coleman cooler, $50 at Walmart. Okay, I got two of those. You fit a 2 quarters in each one, so there's 4 quarters for total to have 2 coolers. So I got $100 in a cooler there. Then this smaller cooler is what I put my back straps and my tenderloins and any of the scrap meat and stuff in it. When I get to town, then I immediately get block ice, and I put block ice on the bottom layer. Then I put meat, and then I put the cubes on it. So when I'm in town, I get cubes, and I completely surround all of my meat with cubed ice. Yes, it's going to melt, but if you're not opening this thing up, it'll stay for 3-4 days, even in heat. So it should be plenty of time for you to get back to wherever you live, and to be able to get that meat to a processor or do it yourself without having to put any new ice in it. So even these cheap coolers will keep ice for several days, and that's why I use them and I recommend them. You know, if you got the money and you want to go get a Yeti or something similar to that, any of those roto-molded coolers, feel free. They're definitely a good product. I just personally can't afford them, and I haven't had the need for them yet. So again, I'll talk about some of the equipment that I'm going to need while I'm cutting up the meat and packing it out. Now, one thing you want to be aware of, that's the basic process, cutting up an animal. Again, check out, there's plenty of videos out there showing you everything you need to know, step by step, really detailed. I just want to give you a quick overview of it. There's a couple things I want you to keep in mind. After you've killed an animal, the hunt is nowhere near over. It's probably going to be the most taxing part of the hunt on your body. Number one, often you're already several days into the hunt, which means you've already expelled that amount of energy. You're already that more tired before you've even started anything. Number two, after you cut up an animal and hung all the meat and everything, you've exhausted most of your energy that you would have for that day, no matter what. So that's when those little 5-hour energy type things or any kind of quick energy thing, I think, is a really good thing to have on hand to get you from that animal back to camp. Okay, so I try and keep some kind of high, quick energy source with me. Water, very important. I know that it's been, with my 2 experiences, it's been super hot. I'm hurrying, trying to get this animal taken care of as fast as possible. And I typically don't take the time to take a drink of water. Before you start your pack out, pound a bunch of water, get some liquid in you. You're gonna need it. Try and recharge yourself as much as possible, especially if you are not from a higher elevation location. You're used to being at sea level or 1,000 feet or whatever. The worst thing you can do is not stay hydrated, and your body is expelling more liquid because you're breathing more, and probably sweating and working harder than normal. So you're going to dehydrate quicker than normal. So one of the number one things you can do to stave off like mountain sickness or just feeling like crap in general is to stay hydrated. So make sure you get some water in you before you start that trek back to camp. But now all of a sudden, you're going to have more weight on your back than you have been having for quite a while. You're tired. Oftentimes, people shoot animals right in the closing hours of light, so it's going to be, often it's going to be dark when you're coming out. You're going to have a pack that's kind of cumbersome and whatever else. Maybe your load isn't quite perfect and you're not perfectly balanced, whatever. All I'm saying is all these variables come together to create a more dangerous situation than you had previously had. And so you need to go slow and take your time and, make sure each step you take is very solid. Often you're going to be going downhill. Your knees might buckle, something like that. So just go slow and make sure you're sure-footed as you're going, because if you step on a log and it rolls out from under you, or a rock, or you hit some dirt or gravel and you start sliding, any of those movements that you've probably experienced in the hunt up to this point, and you know how uncomfortable that was, it's going to be exacerbated by the weight on your back that you're trying to compensate for. So it's really easy to hurt yourself at this point. So all I'm saying is be careful, take your time, kind of think about the elements that are going to create danger for you on your pack out and try and mitigate that as much as possible. especially if you're hunting solo, because that's just going to exacerbate that all the more. So, enough of that soapbox. All right, couple of things about packing. If you've never really packed weight, there's a couple of key points. You want to keep it as close to your physical body as possible, and you want to keep it as close or as high, like from your neck down to like your shoulder blades, your scapula. That's where you want the heaviest part of that load to sit. It's easiest for your body to adjust to that weight being right here than if it's sitting really low in your pack or if it's shifted off to any one side. You want it centered right between your shoulder blades for the heaviest part. Now, I have not done this yet, so I can't say for certain, but I've seen it on videos and it makes a lot of sense to me. I've taken my quarters and put them in with the heavy part down into the bottom of my pack, and they've packed out fine with that. But I've seen guys invert them so that heavy part, like say a hind quarter, that ham is sitting up higher on your back. I think I'm going to try that this year because it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's going to be easier to carry that way. But those are some things that maybe you want to rig up a mock system of weight so that you can try that out this year. And you might want to try that out just kind of around in the yard or whatever, just to see how it feels and where that weight gets carried with your particular pack and how it feels. But that's something to think about. But you want to put that weight up there. And the other thing you really want to do is you want to make sure it's as balanced as possible, so that it's not on one side or the other heavier. Because that's going to force you to have to compensate and lean and kind of torque your back and stuff. But you really want to cinch that thing down as tight as possible. So the more straps you can have, the better. So when you're looking at a pack, make sure you can really cinch it down. I personally have a couple of extra straps that I bring 2 extra straps that are just chunks of webbing with a clip buckle on them that I've just rigged up so that way I can really, if it's not sitting well, I can slip those over my pack and cinch them down even tighter. You don't want any movement. Like if you twist like this, you want your pack and that weight to move with your body and not be bouncing around or whatever, because really the only thing you're going to be switching around is you're going to be transferring that load with your load lifters on your pack. So make sure you have a pack that has load lifters and your waist belt, and that's going to be transferring the load between your shoulders and your waist as far as where you carry it, depending on which strap you cinch down. And I find that, if I'm doing a 1.5 mile hike, I probably adjust that load 2 or 3 times. Sometimes, I'll start out with it kind of balanced between my hips and shoulders, and then at one point I'll just cinch it to my shoulders because I know that I can carry that weight even though it's super uncomfortable. I can carry it for a pretty long distance and just grit my teeth and do it without actually risking injury. If you put a lot of the load on your legs, if your legs are not in shape, you're really going to start to feel it in your hip joint. So, those are things you want to consider when you're doing stuff. Definitely cinch down your pack. Yeah, so I'm kind of looking through my notes here, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments below. Going back to the whiskey here, back to my single barrel, please put in the comments down below what you're finding it for. I bought it for $26.99. It was the most expensive of the Evan Williams lineup that I can find in my stores around here. There are some other varieties, but I'm not able to get those. But for $26.99, I think you're probably better off doing some of the like bottled and bond or something else like that. But it's not a bad whiskey, so don't feel bad about it. $27 isn't exactly breaking the bank, but if you're not willing to spend that on an experiment, then try some of the other varieties I've discussed in here. But please like, subscribe. This is my YouTube plea here. Like and subscribe to the channel. Help me grow it. Interact with me a little bit so I know what you guys like, don't like, and see if I can help out by making the channel better and help provide you guys with some more information. And then finally, here's I'm going to kind of show you my gear and then run through my gear list for packing out specifically, how and why I use it. and just kind of give you an idea of maybe where to start. So first thing, pack. I showed you before, but this is my pack. It's the Mystery Ranch Marshall, and it has a top on the bag. Now you're supposed to be able to pull this top off and use it as just a day pack if you want. I've never done that, but you can see here these straps here that go across. I got extra ones of those that I can take and really cinch this down and compress this bag. Now there is a load shelf feature built into this. I've not used it. I might try that this year as well, which means I can basically unclip all these clips on it, pull the bag away from the frame, and in between the frame and the bag there's a sling. So in that sling you put your quarter or whatever you want on it, you put the bag up against that and then cinch it all down, and then that acts to compress it into your frame, which means that between the frame and the bag is where the meat's sitting, kind of right in here. And there's videos on how to do that and stuff. What I do is I take the bag, I take a plastic contractor bag, garbage bag, stick it inside the actual pack, and then put the meat in there. Now this particular pack has a bottom section down here, and there's a sling inside the bag in here that divides this compartment from this compartment. And so it acts like the load shelf and allows me to put stuff in there as well. I like that because it's just less putzing around with stuff, makes it easy to pick up a quarter, take it back to camp, drop that quarter off, and then go back out without having to really rearrange my pack every single time. So that's how I work. But pack and straps are very important. Having a very good system to be able, a good frame system to be able to transfer that weight is important. And then, like I said before, make sure you have a pack that has these load lifter straps in it, which allows you to pull the weight of this pack forward and up and transfer it into your shoulders. So that's the pack I use. I also mentioned in that equipment video, trekking poles. So how I carry these is I carry them in this little pouch on my bag here. I keep them, they're strapped in like this, and I just carry them like that while I'm hunting. And then when I need them for the pack out, they come out and help me carry that load. They say that having trekking poles will alleviate up to 25% of your weight, which at that point, every little bit that you can do is going to be invaluable to you. Like it'll help you a lot. Help you keep your stability, especially as you're going over rocks, downfall, stuff like that. It's really, really, really going to be helpful. So make sure you have trekking poles. If you don't have these, take the time before you put your pack on to look around where that animal is dead and see if you can't find at least some, like 2-inch round or inch round sticks that you can snap, in between two trees. If you got two trees sitting like this, you put the stick in between the two trees and then torque it against itself to snap it off. That way you don't, you're not whipping it against the tree and breaking something off that can go flying and come back and hit you. You don't want to do any of that, but just put it in there and snap it off. Anything that you can find readily available to use if you don't have trekking poles is going to be super, super helpful. You might feel a little dumb, but it's worth it. So trekking poles. I showed you this in the equipment video as well, but this is my kill kit. So I got my contractor bags in there. I got gloves, so these are just nitrile gloves that I keep in there. I use the Gerber Vital knife. So I got two of them. I got the smaller one and the bigger and the big game Vital. When it comes to elk hunting, I really do only use this big game Vital. And it is a pretty giant knife. But the reason I use Gerber is because this is a scalpel blade knife system, and I don't have a blade on it right now. So normally this knife's about this long. But it has a super easy disconnect system here, which other companies do too. So like Razor's Edge and Outdoor Edge and HME, they all have a really good system as well. Plus, their knives have a rigid backbone on them, and so the bottom part of the knife is the only part you're doing. But for safety's sake, when I'm out there and you're dealing with a razor blade, what I do is, that's why I chose this knife, is because all you do is push the little button down, put your new blade on there, and away you go. I don't really like the Havalons. They're not, you need a like a multi-tool pair of pliers to put that blade on safely. And I feel like if I'm back out, 3, 4, 5 miles by myself, the last thing I want to do is darn near take a finger off trying to put a blade on and off. So that's why I use Gerber. I know that sounds like a promotion, but I'm not sponsored. I have 0 sponsors. So if you hear me talking about a particular product, it's because I use it and I believe in it. Okay. So you can do an elk with just the standard size Vital. I've done it. It's just as fast. The big game Vital is a little bit nicer because it is a bigger blade, but not necessary. A little 4-inch blade is more than enough to be able to do an elk. Key thing is having a sharp blade. That's why I like these scalpel blades. But I can do an entire elk with 1 blade. A lot of guys say, as soon as it starts getting dull, whatever. I can do an entire elk and not dull a blade too bad. And it works out really, really well. Again, you may have heard it before, but I'll reiterate it. You don't need a saw to cut an elk apart. You can do it all with a knife. You can take off every quarter with just a knife. Again, watch some of the gutless method videos. I'll show you how to do it. You can take the shanks off. Everything you need to do, you can do with just a knife, and you can do it safely. So by all means, don't carry a saw with you unless you absolutely want to, or a hatchet or any of that other stuff. You don't need it, but if that's what you want to do, by all means, go for it. But I highly recommend Gerber Big Game Vital. Safe and effective. So, all right, welcome back. Sorry about all that. This is actually take number 3. I actually did about a 20-minute video finishing everything up and went to go process it and found out that it did not work. So stick with me. I'm going to try and go back and redo this whole segment again, and hopefully it takes this time, but we will see. So left off with just my plastic. So I keep a small piece of plastic that I can put down, put meat on, keep it up off the ground. It's pretty hard to put meat into bags by yourself. So another reason to hunt with a partner if possible. But if you need to, you can use the flap of skin from the body. You can flop it over. You can put meat on top of that on the bloody side of the skin, not on the hair side. But a piece of plastic like this, something real light, easy. This doesn't weigh anything. You can lay meat down on top of that and keep it up off the ground, keep it out of the mud, the sticks, the twigs. You can use it, cover over the meat so that the bugs can't get on it as much while you're putting it into bags, that kind of stuff. Also in that kit, I have flagging, just a roll of typical plastic flagging. I only use a small piece. Typically only when I come up on the beginning part of the blood trail, I'll tie off a little piece on a branch or something. If I have to go back, if I have to stop, I'll also use a piece there. But I really don't use too much of this flagging. I really don't have a use for it. But I keep it with me, start of a blood trail always, in case I need to go back, retrace my steps. If you choose to use this stuff, please, please, please make sure to go back. I know it's going to take extra work and stuff, but go back, take it down. That's another reason why I only put a piece at the beginning, or if I have to stop somewhere, is so that way it's easier to collect 1 or 2 pieces. But take it down so that way you don't have to, or you don't have to, that way you're not out there just littering. This stuff, it'll disintegrate, but it doesn't, it doesn't disintegrate, but these little pieces of plastic shred and whatever else, and it kind of strews all about the woods. So please don't litter, pick it up. If you see other stuff out there, go ahead and pick that up too. But I use it a little bit and very sparingly, but it can be beneficial to have that. Finally, You know, and some people use the flagging to mark their bags and stuff. You'll see. So these are the bags that I use. This is the smallest of the. It comes in there's 5 bags in there. 4 of them are the same size. They're for the quarters, and I use them for the scrap. This is the 5th bag. It's a little bit smaller. I use this for the back strap and the tenderloin and a little bit of scrap meat and whatever else. But so some people use that flagging to mark where they have hung their meat. These bags you can see here have reflectors on them and some orange. Those reflectors are really, really high vis when you hit them with a headlamp. I like them. They're synthetic. They're really light. They're more heavy than those cheesecloth style, but the bugs can't get into these at all, which is really nice. It does a really good job of keeping your meat clean. Because they're synthetic, they transport that moisture out of the meat a lot quicker, allowing it to cool quicker through that evapotranspiration, or sorry, not evapotranspiration, through evaporation. That's what causes the meat to cool. Sorry, I'm still a little flustered because, well, it's a little bit later in the day after a couple hours of trying to make this whole thing work. But you'll see they have these little clips on them often, so that you can cinch it down and then slide the clip down to keep them in there. I do that, and then I'll put a wrap or two around the top so it's really nice and tight and cinched down, so that way nothing can get in there. Little trick is when you go to hang these, so like these particular ones, you can hang them using the string that comes with it. So you can do your standard clove hitch, half hitch kind of thing to hold your game bags up. But what you'll find is that when you're doing this and it comes up, when the meat starts sinking down on that, sometimes it gets down so tight that, and it's in a position that if you try and lift it up and untie it at the same time, it typically doesn't work so well when you're by yourself. At least I found that it doesn't work so well. So a nifty little knot or trick is, I think it's called the trucker's hitch, but you go over the top, like say this is your limb, right? You go over top of the limb, come back around, and tie just an overhand knot, right? So you just got a standard overhand knot on there. And then come back over your string, come back through with a loop from the tail end, and then cinch this down. And you'll see that you got it cinched down on there with your loop available. Now go and find a piece of twig or anything you want and stick it in this loop and then pull on the slack end of this, cinching it down. Now because you've done that, and I got it around my finger here, it's tied in to the point so it's not going to go anywhere, right? And because of that twig, the twig can't pull through your knot, and so it's locked in place. But what's nice about it is it's essentially a slip knot. So when you go to grab your meat, you pull that piece of twig out and then pull on your tail end here, and that knot pulls through, and then all you have is just a simple overhand knot left, and you can just pull through that. Now these ones, because I have this end knot in here, doesn't pull through so easily, but if it was just a piece of paracord or something without this end knot on it, it would just pull right off. So, you know, that's a handy little trick to have. Highly suggest using that, especially if you're working by yourself, because you're going to be in a situation where you got 50, 60 pounds in one hand, and it's going to be up off the ground wherever, and you're going to be sitting there trying to get that knot undone, and you're only going to have one hand to do it. So try using that. But synthetic game bags, these ones are pretty visible. They do a good job of cooling the meat down. And then it all packs down really nice into that kit. Another thing I always have with you is a headlamp. I made the mistake one time, actually on my first bull. When I got back to camp with my first load and all my hunting gear and everything, I pulled all my gear out of my bag, and all I had left was a first aid kit, because I never wanted to be in the woods without that, especially when I was tired, and water. And my headlamp was tucked away in another sack that I'd pulled out of my bag. So went back for my second load to bring a quarter out. hiked all the way up, loaded it up, got back, started walking down the mountain, and I was without a headlamp, and I didn't realize that until it was getting dark. So my last half mile of trail is luckily an old gated off logging road, and once I got to that point, I knew I'd be okay. But about 100 yards short of making it to that point, it got pitch black. Now I was hunting, there was no moon, it was clouded over. And so I mean, it was black, and I had to literally listen to my feet walking on the gravel of the road to make it back. And then also, normally I would cut off that trail and take a shortcut that would only make it a quarter mile to get back to my camp. But because I had to go through some regrowth, some reprod, it was, which was super, super thick, and then make it through that, go down like a 30 or 40 foot little gully and creek, and then back up, which was really, really steep, all in the dark without a light. I chose not to do that, especially loaded, to stick to the road and to work my way back to camp. Well, that added an additional 3/4 of a mile onto my already long hike when I was exhausted, and it could have been avoided if all I had done is just use or made sure I had a headlamp. So make sure you have a headlamp. Very important. To make sure you keep in your bag no matter what, as part of your packing your animal out. That's important. Some people talk about and ask about using black pepper or citric acid, stuff like that, for keeping flies and stuff off the meat. I personally have never done it. I never really thought that it was a good idea to pack in an additional amount of weight that may or may not be necessary. So I have not tried that yet, and I've had plenty of good success without it. That's a decision you're going to have to make. Do some research on it, see what other people have to say about it. Some people swear by it, I know, but I just, I've tried to strip down as much as I can to the necessities, and I know that as a solo hunter, oftentimes those necessities that I feel I need are a little bit more equipment than what your average Western hunter is going to use. So I try not to have that extra weight on there. Let's see here. Getting back to my notes, now I have extra notes because I had to go through all my video to figure out what I've already done. Also, something to think about. So I always have a chunk of paracord with me, like 50 feet of paracord or so that I can bring. So, you never know what you're going to need it for. You might have to repair something, use it as a lashing or whatever, but also so that you can hang meat. I think for bears, you want to hang it 12 to 15 feet off the ground and at least 4 feet away from the trunk of a tree, which is quite taxing to do by yourself. And like where I hunt, I got, bears and mountain lions and wolves and coyotes and bobcat, and they're all going to try and get into that stuff. So any meat that you're leaving overnight, it's best to hang it up as high as you can get it. So let me just open my phone real quick. There's a picture in here, and I don't know how well it's going to show up, but it's basically using 2 carabiners as a block and tackle system. And what you do is, let me see here. I think I got a piece of rope here I can use. So, anyways, here's a piece of paracord, and what you do is you create, a standing loop. So just do double up your rope and then do an overhand knot. That gives you a standing loop, right? So you hook 1 carabiner into here, and I don't have any carabiners. Actually, I do right over here. Hold on just a second. All right, this will be good. Okay, so what you do is you hook 1 carabiner through that standing loop, okay? So you throw this whole chunk of rope, so here's the tail end, throw this up over a limb so that it's sitting there. Sorry, this is attached to a tarp at present. But you throw it over a limb like this, right? So that you have this carabiner here. Lower this whole thing down to the ground so that you can stick this tail end through this carabiner. All right. So now on this slack piece, you're going to hook your second carabiner into this slack piece here. So here's your tail end, here's your standing end of rope over here. You got this end tied off to a tree. You got this thrown over the top of a limb, and then you have a standing loop with a carabiner, and then you have this piece down here. So this piece here, this bottom carabiner, is the one that you're going to take and hook this into your meat or whatever you're going to do. Then what you do is, you can see how that goes down. You're going to use it like a pulley, like a block and tackle system, pulling down on this, therefore raising your meat. Okay? It's kind of a cool little deal if you're, able to just bring 2 small carabiners. It works pretty slick. I recommend it, and it can help you out a lot and save you a lot. You don't have to bring a block and tackle or anything with it, and just some small light carabiners will do the trick. So something you might want to consider. Let's see, a couple other things here. Got so paracord, maybe some carabiners. That's going to help. And then finally, kind of the last little bit of gear that's important. Make sure I'm not missing anything here. Pack, poles, headline, paracord, plastic, coolers. All right, so the last little bit then is going to be coolers. Okay, so coolers are pretty important. You don't have to get the fancy ones, as I think I've already stated early on. I mean, this is all I use here are 2 of these, $50 a piece. 1 of these. If you want, that'll hold ice for a good 3, 4, 5 days if you're not going in and out of it. Any of the dead space in there, if you can cut beforehand a chunk of 2-inch foam board that fits perfectly inside the whole dimensions of that. If you have any dead space in there and you put that foam board on top of it and then close the lid down, that will help insulate that ice. And so now that ice only has to cool the space underneath that foam board. So if you have even this much dead space between, if this is your foam board and this is your lid, that much dead space, you now don't have to cool that space. So that's a little trick to keeping ice longer in cheap coolers. You can do the Yeti or the roto molded coolers if you want. I personally can't afford them, and they're heavy as snot, and I don't really see a need for it. It'll definitely hold ice long enough to get you back to where you need to go. And so I get the big blocks, the block ice. I always fill up the bottom with block ice, or if you're smart, you can get some milk jugs and stuff ahead of time. Fill them full of water. Fill them all just short of the top, because they're gonna blow out when they freeze. Because I think ice is 10% larger in volume than water when it freezes. So leave a little gap in there, but fill them up and take those jugs then, and you can use that as block ice. You can bring those from home if you want to save some money, make it easy on yourself, and come prepared with ice then. But you don't need it. You can keep stuff cool without the ice. At least until you can get to town and get on the road. But I use the block ice first, and then I only use cube ice to pack in and around the meat, and with that block ice on the bottom. And I don't buy the cubes until I get back to town. So I've been hunting about 5 hours away from where I live, so literally the opposite side of the state. And because of that, and I'm 70 miles from the nearest town, so I don't bring any ice or anything with me. It's been hot as snot, in the 90s. And so to try and deal with like melting ice and all that stuff, I just don't deal with it. It's easier just to take the animal, cool it down best I can in the elements, and then take it to town as fast as possible, and then put it on ice after I've gotten an animal. Let's see here. A couple of finishing thoughts here. This channel, we're exploring whiskey, we're looking at whiskey, we're celebrating it. But please, please, please do all hunters a favor. don't go out and drink and hunt. In many states, it's illegal to be intoxicated and have a firearm in your possession anyways, or any sort of weapon. But we already get a bad enough rep by the anti-hunters and the PETA people and everything else. And not to mention, look at every single hunting video you have ever, or not video, movie you have ever seen where a hunter's being portrayed and they're just this slovenly, drunkard, bumbling idiot. So let's not perpetuate those stereotypes. Do us all a favor. Yes, by all means, bring something with you. Save it to the end of the hunt where you can truly enjoy it. You can enjoy it with your friends around the fire or whatever, just so you can relax and have fun after all the work's done. But please, please, please save it to the end of the hunt. And then there's a little bit of other benefits for saving it to the end. Number one, staying hydrated is the number one way to help stave off or prevent altitude sickness, right? So if you're not accustomed to being in the mountains and you're not accustomed to being at elevation, there's a chance you can succumb to mountain sickness or altitude sickness. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in. It doesn't matter who you are. At some point in time, it can just strike you. But a good way to help stave it off and prevent it is to stay hydrated. So please don't be drinking ahead of time, like especially at the beginning of a hunt. It's just going to wear you down, beat you down faster than you want. And it's going to make that next day, even if you're not hungover, it's just going to slow you down and beat you up going into that next day. So don't do that. So yeah, just please be responsible when you're doing it, and don't start drinking, don't drink in the morning, or, don't drink every night when you get back to camp. You're going to be exhausted as is. I mean, you're going to have no trouble sleeping. So please, please, please don't do that. Give us all a break. And you're going to be in and around other people. So especially during like rifle seasons and stuff, it's best just not to have that situation in camp. So with that, I think that's all I really want to say about elk hunting. Now, this is the 10, 20, 50, 100,000 foot view of elk hunting and some of the things you want to consider when you're starting to get into it. If you have any specific questions, by all means, contact me. Leave a comment down below. I will try and get back to you. I will give you I'm an open book, as are a lot of other hunters. I might not give you my spots, but by all means, I will help you figure out your own spots and help you figure out what to do. I will tell you what works, what doesn't work for me. I'm not the end-all, be-all of knowledge. I'm still new to elk hunting in general. I've only had 2 years of success now, and I'm going to still say that that's luck at this point. When I have 10 years in a row, I might start thinking I have something figured out. But by all means, I am going to help you guys out as much as possible. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm sharing all my resources that I use with you guys in the description of the videos. And yeah, by all means, fire away and let's get some conversation going. Again, today, this whiskey that we are drinking is Evan Williams single barrel. My barrel was barrel number 1287. Feel free, go pick up a bottle. It was $26.99 here. Again, please leave into the comments down below what prices you're able to find this stuff for. And yeah, welcome to elk hunting. And hopefully you guys are in that 10% of successful elk hunters this year. And if not, stick with it. The only other advice I can really tell you about elk hunting is the successful people are the ones who don't quit. For me, there was no mountain too high, no canyon too deep, no nothing that I wasn't willing to try in order to fill my first tag. So if you got that mentality and you won't stop, you don't stop learning, and you don't stop getting after it, just make sure you're getting up every morning. By day 5, you're going to be dragging your butt. Getting out of bed's going to suck. Just keep doing it. Keep hammering on it, and you'll get there. And yeah, enjoy the videos. Thanks for watching, and shoot me any questions, and stay tuned. I'm not sure what my next series is going to be, but I'll probably do another one of these series videos, and hopefully it'll be something you guys enjoy as well. So you guys take care, and thanks for watching.